Welcome, folks, to another battle scene breakdown. This time I give you Gaugamela in Oliver Stone's Alexander of 2004. And notice I didn't say bad battle scene this time, because it's far better than most. It has its flaws, I'll tell you then. Into glory ride! We open the battle sequence with that thing that makes this movie so good. The only Macedonian troops ever put in a movie that were right on the money. Yes! Movie makers never could get Greeks right, instead pouncing around with fantasy classical stuff. So imagine what a pleasant shock it was 20 years ago to see Stone field these unmistakable Macedonians. Kitted out just right and even using real Macedonian tactics, unlike, for example, this Spartan on the left keeping his shield refused where it can't protect him in the slightest. Older movies sure did love that, fighting with your shield refused shit.
Blood is the food of the gods below. Blood makes the rain fall. Blood makes the earth grow. What makes the grass grow? Blood, blood, blood!
As both king and commander-in-chief, Alexander has clear sacral duties. Thank you, Oliver Stone, for showing this piece of real ancient life. And the priests examine the beast's entrails and divine whether the gods favor our side for the coming battle. Besides their appearance, the Macedonian phalangites astound with the accuracy of their drill. Notice how they're in units of 256 men each. These were called syntagma. Now we see Alexander, a king who was very much in touch with the common soldiery, ride along their frontage and call out individuals whose feats he remembers.
Neoptolemus, I remember you the day you jumped the siege tower at Tyre. You were a giant. And today, how will you fight?
Why, was Neoptolemus on the Persian side? What? The siege of Tyre, the only siege towers were on the Macedonian side. He did not take one of them. God. Fun fact. Alexander took those siege towers across the sea to besiege an island because he built a giant mole of dirt out to it. It is still there, and it is now turned into suburbia in a modern Lebanese city of Tyre. In reality, Neoptolemus did not take a siege tower at Tyre. He was the first man over the wall in the siege of Gaza. And in that same siege of Gaza, Alexander copped a catapult bolt in the shoulder. Fun fact, a few years later, Neoptolemus would be killed in one of the very few single combats between opposing army commanders ever seen in real life.
I still mourn your brother, Hydaspes, who died so bravely at Halicarnassus. What an honored family you descend from,
Thank you
Commander.
for Alexander's distinctive armor panoply featuring a Gorgon's head, the head of Medusa, the woman cursed with ugliness so soul-deep toxic that men turned to stone if she cast her horrid gaze upon them, used later to ward off evil as a sort of talisman. This armor is taken from the Issus mosaic, discovered in the volcanic ash of Pompeii, which reshook our knowledge of ancient Macedonian and Persian kit. Now you can see that Gorgon's head, and here are some of the best historical artists interpreting it, such as the late great Peter Connolly, or the Romanian Radu Oltean, Giuseppe Rava, and his equally madly prolific Angus McBride. Note also the iron scale armour around the midriff, still faithful to the Issus mosaic, and we made an honest effort at his father Philip II's armour as found in his tomb at Vergina. Fun fact, the Issus mosaic turns up in this movie. Anthony Hopkins as a future Macedonian king of Egypt. The original shouldn't be here in Egypt, it should be in Macedon. The one in Pompeii was a copy. Colin Farrell, take a bow. I can believe you are Alexander.
You've all honored your country and your ancestors.
And Oliver Stone, you have honoured the historical cinema by putting these spot-on, accurate, but rarely seen in the movies helmets on the Macedonian troops. And well done on the special smaller shields for handling two-handed 18-foot pikes and for Boeotian helmets on the companion cavalry. You legend! Probably the most famous horse in world history, Bucephalus.
Come, Bucephalus. Today we ride to our destiny.
This exotic helmet fit for a king is a delight. It's taken from the Alexander sarcophagus. Another extremely valuable discovery in archaeology.
Today we ride to our destiny.
But hold up a minute, folks. Let me cross the no man's land and show you the Persian army, also modelled on the Alexander sarcophagus. Thank you for these realistic Persian infantry, and for resisting the temptation to field old-fashioned costumes from the age of Xerxes and Leonidas. Time did not stand still in the classical world, and Persians were now clad in comfortable, baggy, daggy pyjamas. And there had been a military revolution in Persia. At last they had developed counters, admittedly half-baked and second-rate, to the Greek hoplites who had been sweeping Persians off the field for a century and a half, a corps called the Kardakis. Developed just in time to get bulldozed off the field anyway by the current Greek weapon, the crazy long 18-foot pike. So, back to the Persian host in our movie, we see the King of Kings, Darius III, who ought to be called the Coward of Cowards, sending the slimy Bessus to lead a cavalry force out on a foray. How slimy? How about later assassinated Darius? Slimy enough for you yet? Bessus wears the Sarka, or Scythian, style of armour. Thank you, Mr. Stone. Notice that wraparound scale armoured shoulder thingy on his horsemen too. Just exactly what Scythians or Sarka wore across a broad swathe of the world, although I'd like to see basic horse armour too. Besides the Sarka, it was spreading across many nations of Persia's polyglot armies, and there was also a kind of cowboy chaps for the legs. Although by sticking with wussy-pussy javelins like this, they were missing out fatally on another military revolution, unlike their lethal and switched-on Macedonian foes. Wait up, I wasn't keen on those men behind the king with their turbans erect. No, wearing your turban on full noise was tantamount to claiming the throne, and most men knew what was good for them. Last word on kit before the action. I don't approve of these men here. They are relics of the heady days of Xerxes a century and a half before. The wild Ethiopians, in fact. These black men from the hairy fringes south of Egypt were an exotic feature of the armies that had invaded Greece, including even naval marines. But Herodotus's description of them with leopard skins, antelope horns in place of metals, and skin painted half red, half white, have inspired Stone's portrayal here, decades after Persia lost Egypt and access to its wilder southern neighbours. Or you could get your info from these black supremacist AI slop channels and learn such astounding revelations as that Fidel Castro survived 600 US assassination attempts. Actually, none have ever existed outside of Cuban propaganda. And if their ugly denialism of black driving of the transatlantic slave trade, or their claim that Africans invented cannon-proof body armour aren't to your taste, then try their ludicrous superhero Ethiopians in Xerxes' army. Their standard of proof basically consists of listening to a rioting mob tell rumours, and then there's this guy, this king, in a chariot that has no connection to draft animals. It is apparently a wheelchair.
Served as his personal bodyguards and were considered even more deadly than the legendary Persian immortal.
What you just heard was total and utter black supremacist claptrap. There is not one mention in the ancient sources of anything notable done by these men in the invasion of Greece. In closing, Persia had lost access to these recruiting grounds 70 years before. So this here is like going to the Middle East tomorrow and expecting to find no Israel there. Battle is joined, folks. Correctly, Bessos takes the cavalry out on a now or never outflanking maneuver, and I just love that the Macedonian infantry bristle like a hedgehog now. These men were as good as unbeatable. Even when beaten by the Romans, they always managed to push the Roman legions back at the start of the battles. Some of the better grades of Persian infantry try to arouse their own bloodlust. Alexander has a wide-sweeping cavalry maneuver of his own, and the time has come to make my first dumping on this battle scene. For Hollywood is fixated with the idea that every war ever was the Vietnam War or the Zulu War, with heartless firepower cutting down brave men at a great distance. Bullshit. This did not happen, then or in any other battle. Because in reality you didn't get a chance to rain arrows or other missiles on an enemy heavy infantry block. Unless you were up against the worst general on earth, and Alexander was the best. Because the close combat troops were held back out of range behind their own screen of light missile troops. So, far from drenching the helpless enemy with arrow storms, in reality the light troops only got to fight other light troops flinging missiles straight back at them, until the heavy infantry blocks at last get to grips. I think the phenomenon is very well shown in this painting of a Roman Macedonian battle. If you doubt it, then ask yourself, how the hell could these men survive 2 years of battles against Persians to get here, alive, this day? See here how the screen of light troops has been pulled aside for the big showdown as the heavy infantry clatter and stomp into combat like a freight train. So, if you thought these archers were cowardly like today's drone operators are, then no, they were prime targets for the enemy's archers, slingers, javelin men. Now, Darius unleashes his terror weapon, the scythed chariots. Persians had been using these for over 70 years, with only one minor success that we know of. But they had 4-horse teams, not 2. armor on the horse's frontage, and only one man in each chariot car. He would be very heavily armored, and probably not quite right in the head. These pictures are of later Seleucids, or Macedonians of Syria, but Persians looked much the same in their scythed chariots. The chariots were festooned with sword blades on the wheels and on the horse furniture. They sure do look cool hurtling towards the invaders across open space. Fun fact, Darius had sent men out to flatten out the ground the night before, the better for this terror weapon to hit home hard. Correctly, the Phalangites step aside to form laneways. Stone can't resist showing us human legs getting sliced and diced by the ghastly swirling blades anyway. But mostly the chariots just rumble uselessly down the laneways. Correct. The reason this happened in real life was because there was now zero crew. Those lone drivers used to bail out too early. But you couldn't just crash the fucker straight into a block of pikemen all by yourself and become a human pincushion, could you? Satisfying and kinetic as this was, it's not real life stuff. Stone, you put fucking archers in the chariots. Total spare dicks on a honeymoon. Another gorgeous helmet here. Accurate Thracian with bearded cheek pieces, and a big Marlister to what appears to be Antigonus Monophthalmos, Antigonus the One-Eyed, later to rule the region as a real-life Darth Vader and son. No, Mr. Stone, epic fail. I cannot speak well of this typical Hollywood crap. These camels historically did not charge into combat. Very rare exceptions, I'll show you. The only reason these camelry are in the movie is because it's being filmed in Morocco and they want to make good use of the Moroccan Royal Guard cavalry. They do, but this was using them that one bit too much. And so many movies have made good use of them, like The Mummy, or this wonderful Portuguese epic. Down through the ages, real use of camels in warfare was one of two things. It was riding the thing to the war zone and then getting off the cantankerous bastard to fight, or it was skirmishing, shooting from a distance, and being careful not to close. You're looking at Arab camelry of precisely the type that served in Persian armies. Otherwise, almost everyone who ever used camels in battle used them for distant shooting, and then hightailed it out of there rather than get into hand-to-hand combat with the damn thing. And a rare exception was the Parthians, who used them on at least one occasion against the Romans, disastrously failing. Despite heavy armour on both rider and camel, camelry, like cavalry, couldn't just barrel headlong into formed infantry with the point of their lance translating all their shock power onto some poor bastard who gets skewered, because they had no stirrups yet. They would only unhorse themselves. That's why I've shown them passing broadside on only. But they have no obvious weapons, so we'll have to assume they'll just use swords. Beloved of Hollywood and of gamers as they are, there is another basic problem. Reach. Yeah, even allowing for the fact that this game has made the man's sword ridiculously long, and I've rationalised it, how the hell is that something you would want to go into combat staking your life on? You have your camel's massive head and neck obstructing you from reaching the enemy, but the enemy can enjoy a free hack at its head. So, Hollywood and game makers, please stop doing bullshit like this. And with splendid irony, the fact that 15 war elephants The first elephants Greeks had ever clapped eyes on were in the Persian army at Gaugamela, passes unmentioned. And we thank Giuseppe Rava for his excellent painting of the Battle of Gaugamela with war elephants in the background. Hollywood bullshit has made the masses associate ancient Egypt with camels, although in fact asses performed all the functions that are normally falsely ascribed to camels in popular culture. Egypt was still dwelling in the ass age at this point. And why would the fictitious camel troops be black men when the black nations south of Egypt first got camels centuries later than even Egypt did? One unforgettable day in 2011 AD, all of the principles I just explained were acted out on live world TV as the floundering dictator Mubarak paid a bunch of those fuckwits who torment tourists at the Giza pyramids for cheesy camel ride photos to charge into the protesters in Tahrir Square, and the world was liberated from these blowflies at last. They thought they were Lord God Almighty in the heady thrill of charging and bashing. But when they slowed to a halt, the people crowded around them and beat the shit out of them. Which wouldn't leave much. You could bury them in a matchbox after that. Trust me on that one.
My, but you make friends easily, Ross.
Great work, master of the art of warfare, Hosni Mubarak. You should see how he fared taking on the Israeli Air Force. Oops, sorry, wait up. Violence is a bad thing, and I'm delighted to report that the camels were okay after this experience. Well, that's that 5.5 seconds of screen time discussed thoroughly. Now for the other 3 hours. The reason we saw Alexander leading his horsemen way out to the flank was King Darius had the middle ground flattened last night for the good of his terror chariots, and dodging it now will spook him big time. Guaranteed he'll make some foolish decisions to keep his shiny, spiky toys in play. That's also why we saw him sending Bessos in with a powerful cavalry force, because he's taking the bait. And stone conveys this complex masterstroke in all its grand tactical grandeur. Correctly, the companions of the king are shown in a wedge formation, with the great man himself at the very point. Their Persian foes are the most well-armoured cavalry in the known world, and have very superior numbers. Alexander's unerring gift for timing cuts in. Oliver Stone, take a bow. This is a thing of beauty. Forgetting that he has been denuded now of cavalry protection, the king now sends in his numberless infantry, who look great, and don't have a snowball's chance in hell against these automatons, the pikemen. Why the fuck would they? The Macedonian sarissa spears are 18 feet long, and 4 rows of their spear points project past the front rank man. These poor saps are going to their deaths, simple as that. And that's just what this movie duly delivers now. The problem was no one survived from the last battle to warn Persians that charging into a pike phalanx is pretty much a lose-lose exercise. Although I do think too many Persians got past the spear points. That devastating weapon, the sling. I have used lead slingshots and stone slingshots, and let me tell you, the lead ones cannot be seen travelling. The 16-pointed star that symbolised Macedon, and today's Macedonia still has it. Remember this saluting with pikes scene? I don't believe they did this in real life, because those things are ponderous. I've trained on them myself, and gravely overbalanced here. Should the butt spike dislodge a little clot of dirt, then the point will slam down like a sledgehammer, while the butt spike flies up behind him, gutting the man behind from groin to face, while violently vibrating from bouncing off the ground to front. This has the potential to julienne every man in the whole phalanx. Don't try it. I love that we see the winged symbol of the Persian god Ahura Mazda on King Darius's chariot. These are some more representations of Ahura Mazda, and the Zoroastrian religion is still going strong and growing in Iran today. And I love that when interpreting the wraparound armor on many Persian horses of this period, at least one model maker has chosen to interpret it as the wings of the god Ahura Mazda. Yeah. Timely reminder time. This didn't happen because scythed chariots had no crew by the time they slammed into the enemy. This movie's inexorable juggernaut of pikemen is adorable. And so are the Persian infantry, and Darius's moment of clarity when he realizes we have no answer to the tyranny of 18-foot pikes. At the crisis of the battle, Indian cavalry burst through the Macedonian line and raided the baggage camp in the rear area, causing great alarm. They were noted for the outstanding crappiness of their horseflesh. Whether they kept their own native kit is unknown, but if they did, then they stood out as radical in using shields on horseback, and soon it caught on to the rest of the classical world. Despite these two clips here, ancient Greek men did not have underwear, and nearly died laughing at the barbarians who did. Here is Clitus, by the way. The commander he seeks is embroiled in the showdown with the cream of the Persian Empire's cavalry, one of the most powerful and grittily realistic hand-to-hand combat sequences ever filmed. Alexander fought hard and got wounded like any common soldier. He got a sword cut through his helmet into his scalp at the Granicus. He got a catapult bolt in the shoulder at Gaza. He got a 3-foot arrow in his lung in India. Out of respect for those who are prone to PTSD, you're going to see something horrible. Pause now and go to the timestamp in the description below.
Pay attention, lad! Your father still watches over you!
Clitus has rescued Alexander! No, actually, this happened at an earlier battle, the Granicus. Years later, Alexander would murder him in a drunken rage, and go into heroic excesses of grief, a la Achilles, for his misdeed. Now, the foot soldiers fight with the reassurance of a shield, but when the cavalry struggle goes to ground after the initial shock of impact, these men are still fighting without shields, remember. It can be surmised that they copped wounds in every clash and simply got on with it. Thank you for these Scythian axes in this movie, a hallmark of the captivating and infectious aesthetic of the Scythians. Suddenly, Alexander catches sight of the gutless wonder Darius III himself, and cobbles together a scratch force and charges like queer Stalin at a rent boy. Straight for him, for Alexander sure is serious about the duties of real kings to fight for their thrones if they want to keep them. We see him catch up a javelin and bear down like an avenging angel on his unworthy rival. But Wrong battle again. That was at the Battle of Issus 2 years earlier, and they're looking at the mosaic, the Issus mosaic, and Darius has just thrown a javelin at Alexander and missed. There was no javelin thrown by Alexander at Darius. Many years ago, I had an argument with the late great Professor Robert D. Milnes, an expert on Alexander the Great, who said that the cavalry, the Macedonian cavalry, used those giant 18-foot pikes that the infantry used. He was dazzled by the reconstructive archaeology done by Minor Markle III here in Australia, where he made some poor bastard ride a horse with the fucking thing, the 18-foot pike. I said he could have saved himself the trouble just by looking at the Issus mosaic and seeing the length of Alexander's lance. Professor Milne said, "But we don't know. There's a giant lacuna in the picture behind his right hand." Because Minor Markle III didn't mention that the King's Lance has its butt spike in the picture as a tiny island in that lacuna. I didn't fail to notice, because I'm so fucking good. So, in closing, Alexander's Kontos lance is the width of this picture. You've got to hand it to Darius. It takes guts to girl out in front of the whole army. In his signature style, he was one of the earliest to flee the battlefield. But his chariot couldn't possibly be scythed. Fair go, Oliver. You know the king is in the business of coming to a halt close to persons he wants to give orders to. Scythe blades would kill off his generals and messengers. I'd just like to see this throne thief give orders at this point. Because there's only so much authority you can emanate in such circumstances.
Oh, no, get out of here!
Alexander can see his yearned-for battle without a morrow slipping away and strains at the leash to pursue. But the messenger arrives with news of the desperate plight of the left flank.
Alexander, my father's lost! They've overrun the flank! They're into the baggage train!
Armenians crumbling! Ah! Alexander! If you chase him, you risk losing your army here! And if we capture him, we gain an empire!
This is champagne historical cinema here.
You can run to the end of the earth, you coward! But you'll never run far enough!
Fuck off, critics. This is Alexander the Great. Correct. Alexander did take infantry with him in his bold charge at the person of the coward of cowards, Darius. Great to see the Hydaspes troops here too. Armoured like the pikemen, but with traditional shorter spears and larger shields, with a much more athletic battlefield role than the pikemen. There's a unit of Hydaspes in the background now. That was one of the outstanding moments of this underrated epic. Yes, Alexander's judgment always trumped his passions, when he was not dangerously drunk, that is. And our movie's Gaugamela battle sequence has come to an end. We slink into the gruesome field hospital after the battle. Although the Greek authors gave Alexander trifling losses, that cannot be true. And when the Oxyrhynchus papyri were discovered over 2,000 years later, and fragment number 1798 gave Macedonian killed at about 1200, we had at last a much more likely picture. Persian losses, on the other hand, could be just about anything, even conservative estimates calling it 100 dead for every Greek death. Ancient battles usually saw dreadful losses for the losing side, mostly in the pursuit after the collapse. Darius's womenfolk were all in Alexander's custody even before the Great Battle, since Darius had abandoned his own wife and mother when he fled from Issus. Not much of a man, was he? And Alexander treated the captives with such exemplary chivalry that they refused to be rescued by those Indian horsemen who broke through to the Macedonian baggage camp behind their battle line. All things considered, he probably packed a bigger schlong than Darius. Probably Michael Jackson did. Oliver Stone, take a bow. You have delivered a rare, truly great battle sequence. With only 4 blunders worth repeating now, and all of them, ironically, proof of your underlying genius and commitment. For had you been dumbass kind, you could not have known about scythed chariots and wild Ethiopians after all. Even the cringe camelry could be a side effect of learning about the discontinued Persian camelry of Cyrus the Great 200 years before. We've reached the vinegar stroke. Thank you for watching my humble one-man effort right through to the end. You do me much honor. I have uploaded many more battle scene breakdown videos in this vein. Please let me know if you want the entire movie reviewed. Good night from the Jaguar Knight.